Every now and then, brothers will emerge and take over a sport in a way where it seems like they were bred for it. And combat sports are no different, with their fair share of dominant families. It makes sense when you imagine that they grew up having the perfect training partner around at all times to work with. And in Jiu-Jitsu, no pair of brothers have been more foundational to the sport or influential on the next generation than the Mendes brothers. Their rise and utter domination in the early days of the competition Jiu-Jitsu scene would have garnered superstar level of fame in today's landscape. With lightning fast flow movement, they sliced through opponents at the highest level of both the gi and no gi, and inspired the style of every great grappler we see today in one shape or form. For me personally, this Rafa Mendes match at the 2014 Hickson Cup was one of the first things I watched when I started training jiu-jitsu, and it's all I've wanted to do since. I've watched it so many times, and the entire match is like a dance from Rafa, flowing around however he wants. I cannot stress to you enough how pretty it is, and for a 9-minute jiu-jitsu match to have 1.4 million views tells you there's something special about these guys, and quite frankly, almost all of their matches are this beautiful. This match is a magnum opus masterpiece by Rafa as he floats around this high-level black belt, making him look like a white belt and effortlessly passing, sweeping, and eventually submitting his opponent with a triple attack triangle armbar wrist lock. It's like the rest of us are trying to practice a sport while they're doing art. And despite being this good at the top of the game, the Mendes brothers decided to retire in their early 20s before they even reached their peak physicalities. And unlike most other great athletes that hang it up after retiring, these two have banded together to form one of the elite competition teams that exists today, continuing to revolutionize the sport like no other former world champions have ever done before. Rafael Mendes Godoy was born in 1989 in Rio Claro, Sao Paulo, to a happy family with his older brother Guilherme, who was born just 1 year before. The boy's cousin was a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the time, when he started showing them some techniques and noticed they had a real natural ability in the way that they moved for the sport. This encouraged him to keep training them, and eventually he brought them to his academy, taught by head instructors Ramon and Leonardo Santos. At just 13 and 14 years old, Rafa and his older brother Gui were picking up techniques extremely fast and were clearly incredibly gifted. This is when they started competing against adults in the blue belt division of major competitions, despite being young enough to compete with the juveniles, and they were even finding success in winning most matches. But suddenly the young Mendes brothers' lives took a big turn as their parents got divorced, leaving them without a fatherly presence. In a difficult spot while they were becoming young men without a male example to look up to, they could have gone down a dark road, feeling sorry for themselves and choosing to give up on the sport that they were finding success in. But instead, they chose a lighter path and made the decision to channel their focus on the sport and continue growing as athletes. They got back in the gym and trained some more, becoming full-time athletes with at least 2 sessions a day. And all this time spent on the mat brought them very close to their coaches and now mentors. They've even stated that at the time, Ramon Lemos, despite his intensity and unorthodox training methods, filled most of the void that their father left, teaching them not only grappling but the moral values with which they ended up building their characters.
But we had to fight everybody in the academy, tap everybody out, and then he would put us to fight each other. But I think in his mind, he was building us into a great competitor, and that's what he did. For sure it's like a strange method, like we don't do this today. Sure. But I think it's important that he did for us, because it made us learn so much about ourselves, that helping us to just be more mature and have a nice vision of what we had to do to accomplish our goals. We had people in our lives that they were good examples for us.
By the time he was 15, Rafa was catching his stride and became a blue belt world champion in the adult division, which is a pretty incredible feat when you consider that the other competitors in the division were 18 or older. Well, all except for his brother Guy, who was 16 and had won this very title the year prior. So the two shared the gold medal while closing out in the finals match. They would go on to win every match and close out the world championships again the very next year at purple belt, and would repeat the same thing the next year as brown belts, rightfully earning them their black belts at the young ages of just 18 and 19. And although we see this milestone being achieved more often by young grapplers today, thanks to the ease of information on the internet, in 2009 this was a much rarer occurrence and would take a lot more effort and focus in obtaining VHS tapes, DVDs, and a lot of hard mat time to work positions out in comparison comparison to the studying athletes can do in more modern times. Hoffa would go on to take off the gi and compete at ADCC for the first time in 2009 at 20 years old, making him the youngest male competitor ever to compete at the event at the time. He would go on to slaughter all of the competition in the under 66 kilogram division, beating them all by submission on his way to the finals, where he would face his rival and elder by 10 years, Ruben Charles Cobrinha. And up to this point, Hoffa had really not had any trouble winning every match he put his mind to in his first year as a black belt, except against the 3-time black belt world champion Cobrinha, who had his number and handed him his first 3 losses. Hoffa was able to beat Cobrinha once before, but still knew this 5th meeting would be a tall task. Well, it ended up being a 40-minute back and forth war of attrition, where Cobrinha looked to be in control of the overtime period until the young Mendes brother was able to jump on his back and score the needed points to win the match, becoming the youngest male ADCC champion ever. And this was just the beginning of Hoffa's dominance, as he would continue winning every major title in the sport, including 6 consecutive black belt world championships from 2010 to 2016, as well as an ADCC title defense in the next event in 2011, where he beat Cobrinha again, solidifying his spot as one of the most rounded athletes to ever do it, given his success both in the gi and without. His rivalry with Cobrinha also developed further, as the two would meet a total of 14 times throughout their careers. The epic battles between the two legends would end with Hoffa winning 10 times and Cobrinha taking only 4 victories, edging the debate of who is the greatest featherweight of all time in Hoffa's favor for many people. Not to mention his insane 63% submission rate and 93-7 record that to me is even more impressive than some of the more recent records that we've seen. This being because most of these matches were 10-minute IBJJF gi matches versus a lot of the more recent records that have a lot of submission only and no time limit matches, increasing the chance of submission significantly. While Hoffa was on his black belt run, Gi didn't just sit around and watch. He would move down to the light featherweight class to avoid meeting his brother in the finals again every year, and went on an incredible spree of his own. He too won every major at black belt, but most notably his 4 black belt world championships in 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2014, earning an impressive 52% submission rate of his 42-8 record. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate the finals match with Paulo Miyao from the 2014 World Championships. This match had some controversy, which is why it has almost 1 million views on YouTube, but really highlights to me the beauty of Gi's game and his strongest asset, which is his mind. Stay with me here because we're going to get really deep into the weeds as Gi is deploying some cutting-edge, genius-level tactics to get the win. Right from the hop, Gi is trying to squeeze every advantage out that he can and times Paulo's guard pull to try and score the takedown points by making it look like he caused the takedown. Initially, he's awarded 2 points for this, and Paulo can't believe it. But the refs deliberate and the points are removed. Now, anyone who knows the Miaos is aware of their basically unpassable guards, and this era was arguably their primes, meaning it wasn't realistic for Gi to expect a clean pass. And I think he knew this, which is why his top game looked very floaty and uncommitted to his passes, allowing him to be defensive instead of overly aggressive on his attacks. Right here, you'll see Gi hit his signature knee cut, where he almost fully lands in side control, but instead of barreling down on an underhook to score, Gi is happy to stay on Paulo's foot, releases his knee cut back into Paulo's guard, and take a simple advantage. Again emphasizing Gi's elite preparation for his big matches and high-level strategy. He epitomizes work smart, not hard. Paulo ends up coming to score 2 points and even gets deep on a 50-50 armbar, but Gi is extremely calm and nullifies the attack while carefully setting up his lapel grip to answer back with 2 points for a sweep of his own. Both Gi and Paulo grab an ankle grip from 50-50, and Gi's intelligence becomes evident again. Knowing he's up by an advantage and that there's no way in hell Paulo will tap to it, because the Miaos are invincible to leg locks, he plays a different angle to try and come out of this with a score. Both men are cranking on attacks to try and show the ref that they deserve an advantage, but only Paulo scores by showing how deep the torque is on his toe hold. In response, Gi is also strategically pushing Paulo to the edge of the mat before he slaps the ankle lock on again. And this was actually his attempt to exploit the IBJJF's fleeing rule. He knew it was likely that Paulo would push forward to release the pressure on the lock, or that he would roll out, which would send him out of bounds now that they were on the edge of the mat, and it would actually earn a negative point for Paulo. Because according to the IBJJF official rulebook, a technical foul will be called when an athlete deliberately flees the matted area to avoid submitting to a submission hold applied by his or her opponent. But Paulo, being the psycho that he is, eats the lock even more and decides to pull both men into the center of the mat. But this probably deepened Gi's ankle lock, allowing him to come up on top and crank it even more, eventually earning him the advantage as the match ends. And although Paulo was also on an ankle lock when the time ended, Gi's attack was much clearer and stronger because of how he set up the top leverage, giving him the official win. This is a master strategist at work. Now, if you're paying close attention, you might have noticed that all of these achievements came at a really young age, and I haven't mentioned anything about recent competitions. And that's because by 2016, both Mendes boys had retired from Jiu-Jitsu competition at the young age of 25 and 26. For many, this was a shocking announcement, and it seemed there'd be no way we wouldn't see their names on the IBJJF rosters at the next World Championships. But year after year, they weren't there, and it became apparent that they were serious about their retirement. Something bad must have happened. Was it injuries, illness, depression, or something else entirely? How could they be cutting their careers short while sitting comfortably at the very top of the sport? But no, they were happy. In fact, they were working on their most successful endeavor to date and something they had been planning to do all along. Hoffa and Guy first traveled to the US in 2007 at 16 and 17 years old without knowing a word of English. On this trip, they met and formed a strong bond with Pat Tenori, the founder and CEO of Ruka, a brand that looks to combine artists' visions from different subcultures with fashion. And from this early age, the boys became close with Pat, who would offer support in the form of sponsorship so they could compete around the world at major events. Even back then, Tenori saw something special in them and would joke with the Mendes brothers, promising them to open an academy if they could attain the black belt level. Well, obviously they did a lot more than just that. And by 2012, still in their early 20s, they moved to Newport Beach in California to open Art of Jiu-Jitsu Academy with the support of Pat Tenori. AOJ was an instant success not just because of the Mendes brothers' performances, but because they deeply cared about creating the best training environment in the world that young students could come to and develop into champions. Throughout the next 4 years, as the brothers came to the conclusions of their fighting career, it was not the end of their jiu-jitsu journeys, but the start of the next phase as coaches and mentors.
That I could accomplish, like winning like more titles would not like change anything in my life. So I chose to redirect my goals and do something different. My vision is like to create like a new batch of champions like that people never saw before, like group of juveniles that are gonna come and like win every division. In a couple of years, like we're gonna be on top of all the tournaments.
Both Guy and Hoffa started building their families and spending more and more time improving their teaching abilities and crafting a top-notch development program for the new academy. More specifically for youth competitors that were very impressionable and could use a valuable mentor like they had in vulnerable times growing up. So many of the elite young athletes in the sport today credit Guy and Hoffa for inspiring their game and came through AOJ at one point or another. More than that though, the core of the academy is built on the shoulders of the competitors that traveled to California to make AOJ their home and have grown into some of the best grapplers on the planet, with fighters like Tynan Dalpra, Cole Abate, Jonathan Alves, Jessica Khan, and so many more that have grown up at AOJ under the wings of the Mendes brothers and are now dominating at the highest level. By sharing their gifts with a growing team of students, Guy and Hoffa are able to pass on their skills and training style to so many more than if they had decided to focus on their individual competition success and never opened up an academy. And already AOJ has grown into one of the most respected and accomplished teams even on the world stage. As of 2019, they've placed in the top 10 for highest scoring academy at Worlds at every event, and in 2023, they climbed all the way up to number 4 in the rankings for males, number 6 for females, and most fittingly number 2 for juveniles, given the Mendes brothers' emphasis on inspiring the next generation. I think Guy and Hoffa could still be elite competitors today at 35 and 34 years old, taking on the best new faces that the IBJJF has to offer and looking to win more ADCC titles. But calling their competition careers a day at 25 and 26 years old to pursue their lifelong dreams of giving back and supporting young athletes with mentorship and life lessons like they once had from the people that touched their lives is an honorable route to take. Both men have truly influenced the jiu-jitsu community in a positive way, and I saw it firsthand when AOJ came and did a seminar at my home gym. When word spread that Guy and Tynan would be coming to our gym, this seminar sold out quickly from people all across Ontario. They even had to add a second session for their 2-day weekend seminar. The concepts they covered and the thought they put into each technique shown was extremely valuable to my game, and everybody left with something new to work on. They also took the time to take pictures with all of us and even did some Q&A and rolling with as many people as there was time for. Another interesting note is that they brought a young green belt with them who was demoed on for the techniques they taught. He also took part in the rolling and was super strong, so I have no doubt he could be one of the next guys to watch out for at AOJ. I think it's cool that they give these kids an opportunity to travel across the world and get a taste of a big seminar like this and to prepare them professionally for big things to come. Now, 11 years after opening Art of Jiu-Jitsu, the Mendes brothers are building a state-of-the-art second academy in California to expand their jiu-jitsu empire. They're fathers, businessmen, teachers, and retired from competing, and yet they have an influential hold on the game like never before. I hope you enjoyed this video and make sure to subscribe if you're new here. I'll see you in the next one.